Good morning, everyone. This is Christina Osborne from ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'd like to welcome you to the second call related to the market enhancements for Summer 2021 Readiness Initiative. The purpose of this call is to address additional questions on the straw proposal, particularly from stakeholders who didn't have an opportunity to ask them during the last call. We did take notes during that call, so if your questions were answered, please be mindful of others who didn't have a chance to ask questions. So for those who have detailed comments, we do encourage you to include those in your written comments, which will be posted on the initiative webpage for other stakeholders to read. Written comments are due Wednesday, February 3rd, and we will post them the following morning. So we are using the same presentation from the January 27th call. However, we are not planning to go through the entire deck again. We'll just go topic by topic. So if you have a question on a specific slide, let me know the slide number based on the numbering in the presentation that is posted on the initial webpage, and I'll pull that up on the screen. So before we begin, I'll do some quick introductions of the ISO representatives who are on the phone. We have Anna McKenna, James Friedrich, Danny Johnson, Gabe Murtaugh, Brad Cooper, Brittany Dean, Greg Cook, Don Trethaway, Jill Powers, James Lynn, George Angelides, Guillermo Batista Alvarez, and Rahul Kalaskar. We are recording the session today, and we will make that recording available out on the initiative webpage. Just a reminder, please request permission from the ISO before reprinting any related transcription. So first, we're going to turn it over to Anna McKenna. She'd like to make a few remarks, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So Anna?
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Christina. As she said, I'm Anna McKenna. I'm interim head of market policy and performance. I know many of you know me, and in my new role, I just want to take a little bit of time this morning, first of all, to thank you all for joining us again today on this very important dialogue that we are engaged in, especially on a Friday. I understand with the many challenges with our storms going on, as well as the temptation of powder on the hills. I really appreciate you all being here today and focusing in on some of these issues. I'm happy we were able to provide an additional opportunity for dialogue because, as you know, we have engaged in an ambitious effort over the next few months to get ready for summer to ensure that our markets and our operations are all well equipped and aligned to deal with the potential heat events that we expect to have again as we, this summer, and any other challenges on the system we may encounter. I mean, this particular initiative is very important to make sure that our market rules are ready to go and respond as effectively as they can, and get under stress conditions in particular. We think we have to make sure that those rules are as tuned in and responsive as they can be. And I wanted to say that I've been listening to the dialogue. I've been actually engaged with my team and trying to make sure that we are being responsive to all of you. We are looking at this stuff very closely, and we will continue to try to identify, where we can make changes, where we can't make changes, and why. It is a very accelerated pace, and I want everyone to keep in mind, and, with all of us, I think we all have to make sure that we do accomplish the most important items that we have to accomplish for this summer. And if there's anything that requires a dialogue, I want you guys to know that the ISO, myself, all of us are committed to not stopping this dialogue after this effort is done. We are going to continue to evolve our markets as we always do. But in this particular juncture where the industry is a lot of changes happening, we really want to provide a forum of openness and opportunity to engage. And so I wanted you all to understand the motivation behind this initiative, and hopefully the dialogue continues. We are really excited about the involvement. Quite frankly, I am extraordinarily impressed with the amount of ingenuity, both from my team's perspective, as well as some of the stuff I'm hearing on the stakeholder calls when I can chime in, and from the community at large. I think we are all really committed towards the same goal, and I'm really pleased with that responsiveness from the stakeholder community. I really, really appreciate you all doing that. And it is something that I think is near and dear to all of us, which is how best can we run these markets and make them as successful as we can so that it enables reliability and confidence in our system. So I do appreciate the stakeholders community's involvement in that, and my team's involvement and the rest of the ISO's team's involvement in getting us ready for the summer. And like I said, I don't want to underscore the importance of continuing this dialogue as we evolve, the market rules. And the reason why I say that is because I do get a sense that folks may feel an urgency to get everything done now that they're focused on this. Let's get it all done now. Well, there's going to be some stuff we won't be able to do. But on the other hand, there's a lot of stuff we can do. And I really want to focus on that. I want to focus our efforts collectively on as much as we can accomplish by this summer and continue to have this productive dialogue. Don't want you to feel exacerbated when we explore some of the limitations with you all. It is definitely in the effort of trying to get this done, these current initiatives done as quickly as possible. So thank you for participating. And if there's anybody who has any questions of me or on this particular effort and the message, please open up the lines. I'll take questions now.
Sure. So if you have a question for Anna, you can press #2 to raise your hand, and please start by providing your name and affiliation.
I do see a caller in the queue. Moving on to the first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, Anna. Dan Williams from Customized Energy Solutions. I just kind of queued up, not sure if we were just going to jump right into the Q&A or not. Did you want to do that now? Or did you have other intro material to get to?
Well, no, this was just the intro, and if you have any, comments, questions, or concerns you'd like to express with me right now, I'd be happy to address those. If you're already engaged in the next set of topics, we can move on to the next topics or open up the lines for others. I wasn't sure what your comment is about. Is it
okay. No, I was just going to get into some technical. Yeah, I think it's fine. I'll just start in. So, first, thank you very much for kind of scheduling this meeting to continue with the dialogue. And I agree, it's been great to see the amount of participation in the meeting on Wednesday and to keep this going. It's one of those areas where it's really unfortunate that we're in COVID times and can't be all together in the ISO working on this at whiteboards and kind of getting through it in that way. But I think, KISO's done a great job of trying to get the dialogue going regardless. One question that I had that is probably good for you is just kind of around prioritization. And just curious if, from a legal perspective, if you've talked to FERC or, kind of started to assess what's possible from a regulatory perspective, given the complexity of some of these aspects of the initiative around potential tariff filings, getting through the approval process, that sort of thing, in order to, be sure that if we're prioritizing, any item, that we don't run into a dead end with that one, and then wish that we would have prioritized, something else that had less regulatory risk, but maybe could have been, implemented over that same time. So just curious if you have any thoughts kind of in that general area, and then I have a couple other questions too.
Yeah, and that's a good question. Thank you, Dan, and appreciate your comments. We have touch points with FERC on various efforts, and we always engage with FERC before we file on our various efforts, and we try to do so as early as possible. As you know, many of these things we've been talking about in this process, some of these were part of other initiatives that are ongoing. So yes, we have engaged with FERC on some of those things that were previously ongoing and indicating our transition and changes as we engage with the community in this effort. We haven't run everything by FERC yet, and we plan on doing so, of course. I think the prioritization comment is really important because I think, quite honestly, if something is important for us and is important for the community and is important for reliability, important for our markets, I think we need to really dig through that controversy, if you wish, or regulatory risk. We need to make sure we are prepared to address that head on. And part of this is because as we go through these issues, prioritizing I think, has to be as to what is important for us for the summer as a community, not just whether or not FERC will approve it or not. But, I appreciate the comment that, there may be some challenges. But I want us to be all cognizant that having that dialogue as to what is, important and what is not important for the summer, I think needs to be part of the discussion. And the only reason why I say that is not just because of FERC, but also just making sure we're all prepared to do that. But yes, we will engage with FERC as we continue to, evolve this stuff and get a better sense of their, what regulatory concerns there may be. And we have been talking internally about, some of the regulatory risk around some of these items, and we're exploring those carefully. And you guys have given us some good feedback, by the way, as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. The next question I have is probably a more technical one. It's I didn't hear too much discussion on Wednesday about kind of anything that's being done more in the system operator arena. Anything around practices, processes, new tools, those sorts of things. And I ask that because I think that there's a big tie-in to the quote scarcity pricing proposals, specifically the first one of the two, because how the operators do load bias or exceptional dispatch or purchases on the interties and those sorts of things out of market, and especially when they do those, will have a very large bearing on whether a power balance and feasibility actually triggers and how pricing shapes up. Not just between the day ahead and real time, but even between HASP and FMM. So it has a tie into that bid recovery proposal as well. So I'm just curious if you or if any others can kind of speak to any changes that maybe the market should expect in how operators are doing out-of-market activity, or even any new tools that are being developed just to help during these scenarios.
Yeah, and I can ask the other team members to comment on that, but I think generally speaking, yes, we always look at that stuff, obviously, because that is important in terms, and in particular for operational readiness for this summer. Yes, we are looking at making sure that they have all the tools that they need. That is part of our overall effort. It's not part of the stakeholder initiative because it isn't, we're not seeking to make market rule changes specifically in that area. But I'll let my other team members comment if that was. I didn't engage in conversation last week, so and also if we're going to address scarcity pricing later, proposal later in this conversation, maybe I can punt that and have folks address it later because maybe start with our flow of agenda. I know we had an order we wanted to go through, so I don't want to prevent folks from doing that.
Yeah, that's fine, and I can hold my other questions if we're going to go kind of section by section. That's fine.
Yeah, let's do that so that we can proceed, if that's okay, Dan. Thank you for your comments. Anybody else have any other comments?
Moving on to the next caller. Caller, line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Anna. This is Ian White with Shell Energy. Happy Friday. And
hi, Ian.
Hey there. Thank you for doing this Q&A. This is, I think, going to be really good, considering the last call a couple of days ago, we ran out of time. So I appreciate this. I just wanted to echo support for Dan's comments. I think since it kind of ties in with the 2021 Summer Readiness Initiative and then moving into scarcity pricing, I think allowing stakeholders to view data when operators use load bias, exceptional dispatch, or exceptional intertie dispatch, quantifying that and then sharing some data in advance of the stakeholder process for scarcity pricing, I think will be really helpful, because I know that that's something that I've been wanting to take a look at for some time. Definitely don't have enough time to compile and do that for this Summer 2021 Readiness Initiative. So that, I think, is an ask that I have of ISS staff, just to quantify and track that information. over a set period of time so that stakeholders can kind of have a basis from which to formulate comments as we move forward into the scarcity pricing and initiative.
That's helpful, and we'll take that back. I don't have obviously a response to that, but make sure. By the way, you guys, make sure all your requests are put in writing as well, because that helps us to keep track of that. So anything you guys say, please make sure that you put that in your written comments. Definitely will do.
And I also appreciate the concurrent approach to system market power and scarcity pricing, because I think that it makes sense to really identify them together so that one doesn't co-opt the other. And we didn't spend a lot of time, I guess that was Wednesday, talking about the system market power changes for summer 2021. I guess I had a really general question, and Anna, help me if I'm struggling to missing the point, but to me, if inside of the system, if we are in an event where there is supply scarcity, either from energy scarcity or scarcity caused by a lack of ancillary services or operating reserves, I guess my main concern with system market power is as energy, let's just say energy in this case, becomes constrained.
Oh, could I just ask us to pause for a moment with your question on this subject, because we're going to move into that next. I just wanted to make sure I can close out the introductory comments. Sorry, I just want to get us going with the meeting. I don't.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
But at the same time, I also want to make sure that if anybody has any questions about my introductory comments, maybe we can wrap that part up and then move up into the system market power mitigation discussion, as well as other items we want to cover today.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought that this was open dialogue hour, but I apologize.
I just want it is, but I also I think we're trying to make sure we have an organized, subject flow on this. So I don't want to prevent the team from getting to their work, so I just want to make sure that we can close it out on the introductory stuff.
And Ian, if you have questions, we are going to actually jump to the system market power mitigation topic because we did run out of time for that. So let's go ahead. If you do have questions on this topic, go ahead and queue up. We're going to go topic by topic.
Well, let me make some comments on system market power. I'll launch this subject. Sorry, guys. I just want to make sure we don't run out of time. And so let's get it into the system market power mitigation subject right away. I know we ran out of time last week, and I wanted to give everyone a little bit of a perspective as to the changes, that you all saw coming down the pipe with this effort. And I think along the lines, as you were just saying, and I think, as a general matter, the ISO has been pursuing now system market power mitigation for some time. And we did so with the indication of, about 200 hours of constraints on the system. We thought it was important as the system became more constrained to actually engage in the stakeholder initiative and put quite a bit of effort. I think we did develop a good proposal. We had some more things that we needed to work through. But as you all know, as last summer, as we saw some of the concerns we had with price signals, we truly wanted to take a pause and see what was the best option. We've been looking at indices that, whatever we can look at in terms of exercise of system market power. And as we shared with you last fall, we haven't seen anything that would have motivated us to immediately pursue that. But as we're engaging going forward on this issue for the summer, we still continue to have that concern that entities can exercise system market power. If that happens, what is it that we can do for this summer? And the reason why we teamed this up with the, I get the sense that, and believe me, I understand the difference between enhancements to our scarcity pricing that go way beyond what we're proposing here for this summer. But we wanted to make sure that as we look at questions about, pricing signals, what is the balanced approach to that? And I think, based on what we have experienced from last summer, We don't have a strong indication that during the events last summer entities were exercising system market power, but that does not foreclose the opportunity or possibility of that. So our goal is to make sure that those two things remain balanced. And that's why we proposed it this way in this effort. And I wanted to share that with you guys because I get it that, you know, we don't have this overall, how should I say, scarcity pricing initiative started yet. We have to reprioritize our efforts, try to get the low-hanging fruit we could for the summer. But at the same time, you know, I do want to understand and elicit whatever concerns folks have about our approach and keep the dialogue going because this is a proposal. This is what we're targeting. We wanted to be clear about what we were targeting. We want you to know that we're going to have something in place if we need it. We're not going to wait for stuff to happen and then act later. So that's kind of the importance of this change, if you wish, and that's how it got teed up. So with that introductory statement, I think we can dig into the system market power questions. There was some concern about, well, you know, when do you take these to the board? How does this move along? I think I'll address that actually first before we get into the questions because I think there was some concerns about, you know, do you go to the board at the same time or you don't? I think there's questions we need to answer there still, and we're still thinking in that area. But what is important is that the ISO takes a balanced approach to pricing signals, and then when you trigger pricing, shortage pricing, as well as ensuring that manipulation or market, you know, market power, exercise of market power, excuse me for saying manipulation, I didn't mean manipulation, but exercise of market power is mitigated effectively so you get the best outcome of your market, and that is our goal.
Okay, so let's open it up for questions on system market power specifically. And then, like I said, we're just going to go topic by topic. So if you could just ask questions specific to this and then hold off to the other topics on the other topic. So, Shreyas, can you open up the phone lines, please?
Sure. Moving on to the first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good morning, Anna. It's Mark Smith with Calpine. Thanks for your introductory comments and thanks for the overview of system market power. I got a couple of comments. First, in your introductory comments, you were talking about trying to ensure reliability and confidence in the markets. You know, in my time working at the ISO and with the ISO for the last 30 years, I have never seen a proposal to drop a major software change in the middle of the summer. I need you to react to that. I think the reason that we don't do that is because there's always bugs, there's always problems, and you certainly don't want to have something happen in the middle of the summer when you're changing operational systems. So that's the first thing. I do have another question I want to ask you, but can you react to that? I mean, dropping software August 1st to me makes no sense.
Yeah, I think we have tried very diligently to ensure that our drops are consistent, you know, like that we have an organized way of doing it. I agree with you that normally you would not want to have a drop in August. What our goal is to make sure that we get all the rules taken care of ahead of time, that we have the software changes ready to go and implement them in August as needed. If what you're saying is, gee, Ann, I'd rather you do that in June, I think that's a comment you might want to submit to us, and we take that back. But what I don't want to create the impression is that because we don't have, we haven't been to the board yet with our system market power proposal, is that we won't have anything if we need it. And so, yep, I appreciate the fact that this is a unique year, not a year that, not a situation, you know, we normally want to be in. But, you know, we also don't normally drop software in June either, as you know, Mark, and that's a challenge in and of itself. So
believe me, my recommendation was not to move it forward into June. It was to allow it to be done when the integration of all these programs could be evaluated, such as 831, system market power, and whatever provisional simple scarcity pricing mechanisms you have to discover the intended and unintended consequences of these things all working together in a diligent way with market sims and everything else, the way you always do. I'm stunned, quite honestly, that you're going to try to do something in August. Nonetheless, now, if I could, I'll
can I respond to one thing?
Sure.
I just want to respond to one thing because I don't disagree with you, Mark, but that comment you just made is relevant to all the changes we're seeking this summer is what I'm trying to say, which is why I feel like, I think we should really focus on stuff and prioritize, and that is true. But if there's a risk of an issue, I think we all need to be prepared to address it. And that's where this is the message we're trying to send. Now, if you're saying to me, well, we don't think there's a risk, well, I understand that. There's others who have a different perspective on that, and that's what we need to balance out here. So, yes, please put your comments inside. I just don't think it's fair to say that the only thing that would be rushed is system market power. I think all these things are things that we're asking the community to do with us at an accelerated pace, and that's why we've got to keep that in mind also as we consider all the things that we're trying to do this summer. And that's the only comment I want to make on that one.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And from my self-interest, trying to hedge in this market with no confidence as to what's going to happen when is very, very, very difficult. But the other point that I wanted to raise is that, you can't characterize this as a balance between scarcity pricing and system market power. You have two highly, proposals for scarcity pricing are going to be very infrequently triggered, if ever, and system market power will be both ubiquitous, applying to all internal resources, and continuous, applying every hour of every day. You cannot compare those two together. A comment, you don't need to react to it, but I'll put that in comments as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Chris, how many do we have in the queue?
Yes, we have a few folks in the queue.
Okay, next caller, please.
Sure. Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Mike Castellano from the California Public Utilities Commission. How are you doing today?
Good, thanks, Mike. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'll just follow up on something Mark said there, that the system market power is going to be active all the time. That might be true in a technical way, but the mechanism doesn't really do much from what I recall. So I don't think anything is going to be mitigated on a regular basis. However, I would like to say I got in the queue a while ago because I wanted to thank you for your comments on wanting this to continue to be an open dialogue. But I also wanted to make sure that a lot of CPUC staff and I think a lot of stakeholders who have been involved in storage, in particular this, what is it now, the minimum state of charge constraint, do not feel like there has been much of a dialogue. We've sort of been saying, no, this is a really bad idea. We don't think it's going to work. It's going to have adverse consequences. And there's not really been much response from the CAISO other than we don't know what else to do. And we've offered alternate solutions. And the CAISO has just said, no, we can't do that. We don't want to do that. We're not going to explore it, et cetera. So, saying you want to have a dialogue is great, but responding a little bit more would be a lot more meaningful.
And thank you, Mike, for your comments on that. And we are going to get to that shortly, that subject specifically shortly. We'll have a dialogue on that. I think there has been I think there has been a lot of movement on the ISO's proposal. I think what we have lacked is an opportunity to, catch up in the very many different forums. And, that particular initiative was under the Resource Adequacy Enhancements Initiative. This started, now that, we've been thinking, churning, reacting, adjusting. We're going to try to address today some of the things we're doing to respond to their concerns. Our goal there in that particular effort is not to just keep steamrolling down the pike. I mean, I think we have to recognize that, there's some challenges and we want to keep explaining those for the summer and for making sure we can rely on the resources when needed. On the other hand, we're also committed to evolve our markets, and we're going to share a little bit more on that. So I won't steal the thunder, but, I think I want to make sure that there's also an appreciation that between the enhancements in the RA forum with regards to the storage proposal, then our efforts to try to accelerate some of these measures so that we can feel more confident about next summer, that full scope of changes hasn't been presented perhaps to all of you yet. So we'll get there to that. Maybe that'll be an opportunity to either, I do think the full scope of discussion is going to happen in our enhancement stakeholder process, and I do want folks to make sure you're engaged in that, because I think that, we can't do everything in one place. But we will touch on that a little bit in a little while, so maybe I'll let that go. If there's any other questions about system market power, maybe we can engage in that a little bit right now before we move to the next topic. And thank you, Mike, for your comments. I appreciate the feedback.
Yeah, so if you have a question about this topic, please raise your hand. If you're in the queue for another topic, go ahead and lower your hand and just raise your hand when we go to that topic. So, Shreyas, we'll go to the next caller, please.
Sure. Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Anna. This is Callie Wells with WPTF. How are you?
Hi, Kelly. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Hey, good. So actually, I wanted to touch on some comments that both Mark and Mike brought up, but I kind of wanted to get back to this idea of the system market power mitigation design being balanced with, I think Brad coined them, scarcity light proposals that's included in this effort. I have to agree with Mark. I don't see these at all as being balanced. I think one of the main reasons why the system market power mitigation was put on hold, and as you mentioned, there was still a lot of things that needed to be worked through. So one, I don't fully see this proposal as being completed. There was still a lot of comments and questions that were outstanding, both in the last proposal iteration as well as the MSC. So it was surprising to us to see you guys proposing to move forward with what the latest design was. So there's that. You even mentioned that, there's still a lot of things to address here. So I don't fully see this proposal as completely baked and completed with the stakeholder process. But one of the things that was always brought up in there is the risk that putting in system market power mitigation has to deterring imports. And that risk is 24/7. So saying that risk that will be occurring 24/7 is balanced with these scarcity light proposals that may or may not trigger once in a while. I don't see that as being balanced whatsoever. You mentioned that you guys kind of the idea is you want something in place, and I think there is something in place right now, and that's DMM. DMM provides that risk that, as participants engage in the market, there's always that risk that DMM is monitoring behavior, and they have the ability to take it to FERC. So I think just knowing that DMM has that authority today is enough going into the summer to balance out with those scarcity light provisions. And it could be something as simple as, them putting out, and I hate to say this, another report, just making it more transparent. This is what we're looking at. This is what we're seeing. So I think there is something that exists today that I think you guys can leverage without introducing this risk of deterring imports by moving forward with the system market power mitigation.
Yeah, those are good comments, Kelly. And, I think that I'll take a little bit of disagreement with your statement that we still have a lot of work to do in the system market power. I do think we have some work to do still. I just want to suggest that the intent was not to turn this stakeholder process initiative here into how do we figure out what we do about system market power, because we have other proposals on the table that require further development. The intent is definitely, after we've done some work in this particular, these other initiatives are much less baked than the system market power proposal is based, is to then go back and engage in that process and make sure we can keep, tie it up and get it ready to go. So I agree with you, there's some work that needs to be done, but I'm not quite sure that there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So I think there needs to be some re-engagement in there, and what we were thinking was, let's focus on these other items that we put in. The reason why we even brought this into question here is because, and I guess Mark was hinting to this too, this continued concern about what's the ISO doing, what's the ISO doing. And, you know, I think I want to be transparent that I don't think the ISO has ever taken the approach in its market that it'll go after people after they exercise market power and then go deal with that after the fact. That sends a wrong signal, I think, to the community. I think it is, and I think you guys also have advocated for making sure that we can, you know, make sure that we deal with these things through our market. I think that's our goal here. It's not that we don't have the ability to go after people and go through a lengthy, you know, process of investigation, et cetera, as to whether somebody truly either committed fraud or committed manipulation. I think market power is a little bit trickier when you get into a post-process. So I think the reason why we started the stakeholder process a year and a half ago was because we always have been very consistent in our message that, hey, we should do what we can in our market that ensure the market itself is balanced on both ends with this regard. So that's our approach, and I get it. It may not be, you know, not everybody may agree with that approach, but I just want to make sure that you know, is understood.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. I think just a couple responses there. It's not that you know, I get the post-market process is after the fact, but just I think knowing that DMM is there monitoring behavior, whether or not that actually results in, you know, the exertion of system market power, they're there even just looking at behavior just in general. So I think knowing that and maybe leveraging that with some more public reports is a more appropriate balance with these scarcity pricing light proposals going into the summer so that we can then spend more time fully developing system market power mitigation with more robust scarcity market designs that was, you know, everyone's, or at least my understanding was the game plan, you know, about a month ago. And so one other thing is, you know, I wanted to kind of go back on some discussion about prioritization. And this is one that, you know, you mentioned the efforts in this entire initiative is really to get us prepared for the summer, and we really appreciate and understand that. But this one, system market power mitigation, doesn't address anything specifically that came out of the root cause analysis. So I think when you go back and you're looking at your prioritization, I think this is one that, one, does not address anything that came out of that root cause analysis, which is really the gist of this whole effort right here. Still introduces significant risk with reliability. You're going to continue to deter away the imports, and that risk is 24/7. And it's not balanced in here with the scarcity pricing light proposals. And this one probably has a lot of regulatory risk. I'll let, you know, that's obviously not my area of expertise, but so when you go back and if you guys do, you know, talk about prioritization, this is one that I will probably agree to disagree on this one, but this does not make sense to have in this effort at all.
Well, definitely provide us any input you have as to why you don't think it's relevant for the summer. I mean, we're all ears on that, but we do feel like there's still a continued need to address it. So absolutely, you know, put your best case forward as to why it's not needed for the summer. We're definitely happy to hear from WPTS and the remaining community.
Well, yeah, and the reasons for all of that that I kind of just walked through, the main one being it's going to deter imports. And the root cause analysis shows those imports.
Right. And explaining that would be helpful, so please go ahead and put that in your comments.
Okay, I will do. I will pass the time along. Thanks.
Moving on to the next. Yeah, please go ahead.
Go ahead, Shreya. How many do we have in the queue, by the way?
We have 5 more callers in the queue.
Okay. Again, if your questions related to system market power, you know, we welcome those, but if it's related to another topic, please wait until we get to that topic. Go ahead, Shreya.
Sure. Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Laura Trelease from the Bonneville Power Administration. And just to add on to some of the comments that were already made, I understand the desire to want to mitigate against the risk of participants exerting market power. But I think that there's also a risk of mitigating when there's not actually potential for market power. And CAISO had quite a bit to say in their revised draft final proposal that if system market power mitigation is applied when there's not actually potential for market power, that it discourages supply participation, it leads to market prices that do not support suppliers' real operating costs, and most importantly, it discourages load-serving entities from engaging in long-term contracting, which the CAISO has said is fundamentally essential protection against market power. So I think the long-term contracting is a piece here that's really important for load-serving entities to do the right long-term contracting ahead of time to protect against market power, and that is an option that's available for them this summer. Bonneville has specific concerns about the system market power mitigation proposal, the revised draft final proposal on inappropriate triggering of mitigation. The CAISO analysis had showed that there were 231 15-minute intervals in 2019 that would have been triggered, that mitigation would have been triggered, where if you look at the DMM reports, all of 2019 was very competitive. In fact, the average price cost markup was around 70 cents per megawatt hour. So those are just some data points. I was glad to hear that the CAISO feels like more work needs to be done for that proposal, but we are concerned about shoving it in for this summer and the unintended consequences. We agree it should be part of the more comprehensive scarcity pricing initiative, and that those should be done together and should be considered together. So I think we also just want to share our concerns here about the CAISO moving forward with this proposal this summer, and note that, again, long-term forward energy contracting is going to be the most fundamental essential protection against market power. Thanks for the comment, for the ability to comment.
Thank you, Laura.
Moving on to...
Yeah, hold on one second. If you just have comments, detailed comments, if you could just include those in your written comments and submit those next Wednesday, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you have any questions that you need answered, we do want to make sure that we can cover all the topics today. So if there's any specific questions with market power, otherwise we can move to the next topic.
Yeah, I would suggest the following, you guys, because as I tried to say earlier, I don't think we can engage in the merits of the system market power proposal in this discussion. We really have a lot of stuff to talk about and trying to flesh out the other proposals a little bit more. I really take the message very well, and I understand clearly that there's differences in opinion as to whether they should go together or not. And I appreciate that. I think we should proceed maybe to, if there's, other concerns, maybe quickly on system market power, but I'd like to move on to the next topics because I'm getting a little bit nervous about time right now.
Let's go ahead and go to the next caller. Again, if you just have comments, if you could just lower your hand, but we're just looking more for questions. Otherwise, we can move to the next topic.
So do you want me to unmute the next caller in the queue?
Yeah, let's go ahead and see if they have a question.
Sure.
And then I think we need to move on.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Anna. This is Ian with Shell Energy, and I do have a question on system market power. And so thanks for taking this. My question, and apologies if I am missing the point or really elementary in my understanding of the point of it in this, in this place for summer 2021 readiness. But wouldn't the system consider the situation like August 14th or 15th last year, where there was a near the net peak, there was an energy scarce, or there was consider as an example where there's energy scarcity. Wouldn't you expect to see an uncompetitive situation existing when there's an energy scarcity situation on the CAISO markets? Am I understanding this correctly?
Hey, this is Brad Cooper. Hey, this is Brad Cooper.
Hi, Brad.
Kind of getting into technical. Hey, kind of getting into technical details, so I'll help out Anna.
No, that's great.
If I understand your question correctly, when there's scarcity in our market, is like if we're relaxing the power balance constraint, system market power isn't really is not applicable in that situation. At least economic withholding, inflating bids, physical withholding could cause that to occur, but economic withholding, inflating bids is irrelevant during those periods because bids aren't setting the price. The penalty price
Demand
in the market is setting the price.
Demand response.
Or if we're shedding load, if we don't have enough supply to meet load, then the market's power balance constraint penalty price or pricing parameter is the $1,000 penalty price for relaxing the power balance constraint is setting the price.
Gotcha. And okay, that's really good to know. I think that helps me understand things better. And so because of that, I think that it is important to consider system market power and scarcity pricing together, because it's important to not have one mute or trump the other. And if you're in a situation where you're shedding load or there's an energy scarcity, i.e. the system is uncompetitive because there's a lack of energy offers, it would be disruptive and distortionary then to mitigate every price inside of the CAISO during that situation. And I think that is kind of where other stakeholders are commenting at, or where they're at when they comment that, they're concerned that one mutes over the other. And so to the extent that those impacts can be co-harmonized, I think that is very important. So I appreciate that clarification. And so, that since we are talking about system market power here within 2021 summer readiness, I think that because of those concerns and because we have kind of like scarcity pricing light considered for this summer, I'm not sure that this is the best place for this discussion this summer, considering that we do have a lot of work to do to make sure that both scarcity pricing and system market power can work together and not sort of run over each other. So appreciate that, and that's my only question at this time.
Okay, thanks for the comment.
Okay, we're going to go ahead. We're already 55 minutes in. So let's go ahead. We're going to go to the export and load priorities topic. If you have questions specific to that topic, hold on one second while I get to that slide. Please raise your hand by pressing #2. Again, if you have more detailed comments, if you could include those in your written comments, that would be great. Hold on one second. Sorry. There we go. So any questions about the export and load priorities topic? Again, press #2 to raise your hands.
I see a few callers in the queue.
Okay.
Moving on to the first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Bonnie Blair. I actually had a question about system market power. I think it's quick.
Sure. Go ahead, Bonnie.
But it may be a dumb question, so forgive me if that's the case. I'm not clear on what it is you're proposing. Are you basically proposing to implement the draft final proposal or the last draft final proposal in the Market Power Mitigation Initiative, or elements of it, or you haven't decided yet?
Bonnie, this is Brad Cooper. Yes, we're proposing to implement the draft final proposal that we published in the System Market Power Initiative. There may be some tweaks we need to do to that. We haven't published we have a new process where we publish the final proposal after we go through the business requirements and the tariff. So, I suppose, we could look at some modifications of the design, but it would be largely what we published in the draft final proposal.
Okay, thank you. That might have been sort of implied between the lines, but I wasn't sure about it, so I appreciate the clarification. Thanks very much.
Moving on to the next caller.
Thank you.
Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. This is Partha Malvadkar with PG&E. I'm in the same position as Bonnie, where I had my hand up for system market power. My question is also probably pretty quick, and sure, maybe one comment that goes along with it. I'd be interested in the ISO's thoughts on some of the discussion they had previously on discouraging imports. The way I viewed the CAISO's proposal was that the CAISO really was taking on that import incentive via offering at minimum the option of having the imports settled at the HAPS price. And so to some degree, by giving this certainty for block hourly import bids, I really thought that was sort of one of the key elements that sort of eliminated some of the concerns on discouraging imports by having system market power mitigation. I really thought that, I would just be interested in the ISO's thoughts of, I thought that was probably the bigger tie-in than scarcity pricing in terms of how the two would work together.
Partha, this is Brad. You're referring to our proposal as part of this to pay imports the hash price?
Correct. Yeah. And so basically, if you paid imports the hash price for block hourly imports, they could have that price certainty where even if the mitigation worked to such that it lowered the 15-minute market prices, those imports would still be provided that certainty. So,
but the mitigation is still run in the hash, so the mitigation can affect hash prices. It wouldn't, since we're not mitigating imports, it wouldn't affect hash prices if imports were marginal as far as setting the system marginal energy costs, but to the extent internal generation is marginal, that hash price could be based on a mitigated bid.
Yeah, but I take it that they would still not be, if they were settled at the hash price, maybe it'd be good to provide examples, those units where they're dispatched based on their bids and the set hash price, that mitigation wouldn't cause them to be dispatched uneconomically at the ties such that additional uplift was needed. And maybe it'd be helpful if the ISO was able to sort of walk through those examples. Yeah, true.
Fair point. They would be guaranteed at least their bid price, but it could affect the intra-marginal rents they're paid.
Okay.
In other words, in plain English, it could affect the price they're paid, though you're correct, they would still at least be guaranteed their bid price.
That's helpful, Brad. And maybe the second, once you get to the next topic, we'd be interested in working with the ISO on implementation of the SMPM for this summer. I recognize there's probably a lot of work that needs to be due to get prepared and to make sure that testing and readiness is ready to go. And at least the way I had viewed it is, obviously, compared to a lot of the other proposals out here, the SMPM went through a lengthy and full initiative process. And so, we look forward to working with you all on to make sure it's implementable in a timely manner. So, thanks again, Brad. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, Partha.
Yeah, we did receive a question about the export load priorities topic in the chat. Why is the ISO not considering explaining the why is the ISO not considering wheel-throughs to support ETA exports? I do not recall explaining the reason why in the Wednesday presentation. So can somebody respond to Ian?
Because the wheel-through transactions, Don, haven't received any import capability, and so to the extent that we gave a higher priority to the wheels, we could, the result could be that we would allow a wheel to clear through, which limits the ability for us to sync RA imports into the CAISO BA. And we are looking at we added an item that we recommend adding to the catalog, to where if we do want to develop, we need to develop a process where you could give that high priority to wheels, in which they would need to receive some level of import capability, and what the process would be for determining what that is.
Okay, so if you have any questions related to export and load priorities, any other questions, press pound 2 to raise your hand.
Yes, I see a few callers in the queue. Moving on to the first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. This is Rayanne Quadro on behalf of EDF Renewables. I have several questions, but in the interest of time here, I think I'm only going to make one statement, which is that we're really focused on driving discussion to the comments on this meeting, and they certainly were at the last meeting as well. I'd like to request that the CAISO does sort of an old-fashioned stakeholder comments matrix for this initiative, especially absent a paper proposal, really getting on the record and driving towards detailed relational conversations on these opinions and topics would be really helpful. So if someone could respond to that directly, I would really appreciate that.
Yeah, this is Brad Cooper. I wasn't following your comment. Could you repeat it one more time? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking for on this stakeholder initiative for the CAISO to publish an old-fashioned stakeholder comments matrix, an Excel spreadsheet where you say who commented, what they said, and what the CAISO's response is. You know, in this sort of abbreviated stakeholder procedure, I think that would be really helpful for driving discussion to clear endpoints and understanding where everybody's position is landing.
Yeah, sure. You know, in this presentation, we do have a summary of comments and responses. I guess we didn't. I don't remember if we listed names or that, but yeah, we can consider that. But you know, those extensive stakeholder matrices take enormous amount of time, and we got to look at whether we have the bandwidth to respond to every last little comment in detail, but we'll do what we can.
Thanks for your comment, Rhiannon. Can we go to the next question, please?
Sure. Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, Anna. It's Mark Holman with PowerX. I had a couple of detailed questions around the wheel-through relative to load priority. And if I could just walk through a couple of scenarios, really trying to understand what the CAISO is proposing. It sounds like it might be a change in penalty prices, but if I understand it, in your IFM, you're going to clear based on economic bid price. So if the wheel is more economic, it will be awarded relative to import RA. And then when you get to the RUC process, if the RUC process determines that you need more import RA to serve load, that can result in a reduction in the priority of wheel-through service, which could ultimately result in curtailments. Did I describe that correctly?
So this is Don. So that's correct. They would have when we went into the residual unit commitment process, the RUC schedule that would come out of that would be reflective of what's needed to serve CAISO's load forecast, which if we needed to have additional imports beyond what cleared the IFM, that would have those imports would have a higher priority than the wheel. That's the current proposal. And it's done through penalty pricing.
So through penalty, you're proposing to change the penalty pricing. So that would drive that outcome. I'm just trying to understand. So last year you had a issue that was identified of very substantive load under scheduling in the day-ahead market, which is a concern. If load under scheduled in the IFM and did not clear because they weren't competing with the wheel-through service to secure supply, and then you get to the RUC, when you replace that bid-in load with the CAISO's forecast, that under-scheduling can cause then the RUC process to result in the wheel being deprioritized to make room for import RA. And similarly, the CAISO, and again, understandably, to protect their own reliability, uses load biasing in the RUC process, and that too would deprioritize wheel-through service. So either under-scheduling of load or CAISO load biasing can be drivers that lead to that deprioritization. Is that a fair, accurate?
Or virtual supply.
Right, but the first two, understood. So I guess I think what's helpful here is to kind of take a step back and understand the pushback that you're getting from outside as it relates to these initiatives. There was a very comprehensive report on the summer assessment, but it was really from the CAISO BAA's perspective, and I don't think there's been any report on the impacts and how last summer played out in other regions. And when I think about it, I think, if you think about the ratepayers in other regions, the CAISO's not alone in not being resource adequate. But there are many VAs where their ratepayers are paying hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of dollars, to install enough resources to be resource adequate. For those VAs that are not, CAISO's not alone. But the ratepayers in those regions, their utilities are filling the gap in the season-ahead basis, in the month-ahead basis, and in the day-ahead basis. So ratepayers in numerous VAs are incurring the costs of closing that resource adequacy gap so that they come into the real-time market, and particularly the EIM-RS, fully resource sufficient with enough capacity. And I think you've heard that the circumstances of last summer was that the CAISO BAA was not closing their gap completely. There was a very substantive gap, and the EIM was used for 2,000 megawatts or thereabouts to close that gap, while everyone else was incurring the cost either through installing resources or contracting ahead of time to come to that. Similarly, every other entity is offering wheel-through service on equal priority to imports. In fact, some of the imports you're talking about prioritizing, they're using wheel-through service on Bonneville's transmission system, on Portland's transmission system, and on other transmission systems. And those entities are not saying they're going to deprioritize that wheel-through if they have a need for imports. They treat it on equal priority. And so when I take a look at the overall package here, we had very inequitable outcomes last summer, where everyone showed up to the EIM resource sufficient except for one BA. Everyone maintained their exports, did not curtail firm exports. The CAISO BAA did. And it feels that we're on a path now, and I'm very sympathetic, and I really appreciate, Anna, your comments, that the CAISO's got some real challenges, but it seems like this package, we seem to be on a path heading towards the summer where the CAISO BAA may not close its resource adequacy gap, may have to curtail firm exports, may end up using the EIM to address its capacity gap, and now we're even talking about going further and deprioritizing wheel-through service while the CAISO BAA enjoys wheel-through service on equal level to other BAs. And so it's really challenging from the outside to see this package go forward I think what we would like to see in terms of this overall package is that the CAISO address fully its resource adequacy gap before the summer. Don't come into the EIM 2,000-3,000 megawatts short day after day in a heat wave. Treat wheel-throughs the same way you did last summer on an equal basis to import RA and curtail them pro rata. Don't elevate the reliability interests of the CAISO BAA over other BAs.
So I would note that the other balancing authority areas, to the extent that they need import capability to serve their own load, would not accept a wheel. And so I think that's in essence what our market's a little different in that we make that determination, through a market. But there's not the ability for another balancing authority area to come and say, I'm going to wheel through your system regardless. And so again, by adjusting these priorities, we're reflecting the priority that to the extent that we need import capability to get our RA fleet in to meet the load forecast in RUC, we will not allow that wheel to schedule. It's not curtailing them. What we're trying to do is to make sure that we don't create schedules that are not able to be honored in real time.
Don, I don't think that's an accurate description. There are many entities that have firm transmission, for example, wheeling through the Bonneville system. If Bonneville got into a challenge, they're not going to deprioritize that wheel-through service so they can take more imports. I think that there is, separate from the legal issue as to whether this is acceptable, which I don't want to go into today, you're not providing any opportunity for wheel-through service to compete with imports for that transmission service in the first place. And then you're saying when I get into my day-ahead process, if I need imports, I'm going to deprioritize the wheel-through service. I think it's important to understand we're very sympathetic in understanding the CAISO's retiring generation, aggressively pursuing environmental policies, and has a need for imports. But there are also Desert Southwest BAs that have a need. They retired a large coal plant last year. They're trying to meet their load too, and everyone needs to be able to rely on transmission service on everyone else's system on an open access basis. And if you can show me how you're giving an opportunity for the Southwest to acquire and rely on wheel-through service on a level playing field with imports, I'd be happy. But you're saying you're recognizing that need, and you'll put that in the catalog and do it at some point in the future. But in the meantime, you're changing the priority from last year, your long-standing practice for this upcoming summer, and saying we don't have a process for a level playing field, open competition between wheel-through service and import service for forward transmission. And given that we don't have a process and we have a reliability need, we're going to give the import RA priority and leave the Desert Southwest region struggling to figure out how they're going to serve their load. And I don't think that's the right outcome here.
Mark, this is Anna. I just wanted to, hi Mark, sorry, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. And shame on you for taunting me on the legal issues. I'm not serving as legal counsel anymore. So.
By the way, thanks for your opening comments, Anna. I really appreciate those.
You're welcome. I didn't want to engage in the legal discussion, but I do want to say a couple of things because I think I don't think we're going down this path to create barriers on open access, which I think is what you're suggesting. But I do think we're being transparent about the changes in our practice, and we're hoping that our goal is that our practices are comparable to other BAAs. I think the challenge here we have, and this is where I'm going to ask that maybe we try to, focus the argument a little bit, because when you talk about firmness of transmission, you talk about firmness of power, those two things can be very different things.
Yeah.
And I think it's certainly true that the way the ISO goes about accomplishing those two things is different than how our neighbors do it. We run a market. We don't have the same oat-based like tariff structure that others do. So we always have to work together to make sure those rules are comparable to each other. And so what I think we're trying to get to here is that, in establishing those rules, there's a difference on how we treat the entities in terms of currently treat the entities, our wheel-throughs as well as our exports and imports. we certainly have been in a space where when there's sufficient capacity on the system, I would say our system probably provided a little bit more, our methodologies provided more latitude when you have more capacity. We're not trying to say you can't use our, we're not going to allow you to use our system to wheel through. I think it's not the outcome we want out of this, and it's not fair to characterize it that way. But I do appreciate that understanding the subtleties, maybe, and the importance of the differences is part of this effort. So I just want to make that statement and that plea because I think we can probably debate for very long on this issue, and I would suggest that maybe, we can talk more about it, but we really have to focus in on making sure that we're getting the comparable treatment. And I think we're open to understanding what differences there are there and making sure we align those. And that's our goal here.
I appreciate that. I think a few comments. I do believe that the CAISO is providing substantive wheel-through service in the vast majority of the hours of the year. I think we need to really think about, though, just think about last summer. You had import ties full at Cobb and Knob from the Northwest. You had two regions that were struggling to have enough resources to maintain reliability, the CAISO BAA and the Southwest, and you're import constrained at Cobb and Knob. And both regions, of course, want to maintain reliability. And I think what this proposal is doing is saying when we get into those situations, even though they're relatively rare, we're going to prioritize the imports over the wheel-through service. And that not only, that may happen, it might not happen at all this summer. Maybe we don't get the weather. It might happen for a handful of hours. But I really want to make sure this resonates with you, is that has an enormous impact on entities in the forward time space and their confidence in contracting. How does an entity in the Southwest contract with someone in the Northwest to try to maintain reliability for the summer season, a resource adequacy type product, with the expectation that if those interties fill, that wheel-through service may be curtailed to elevate the CAISO's need for power above theirs. And happy to go through the details and try to keep talking about this. I'm just trying to really highlight that this is really important because it affects whether entities can actually contract to use the CAISO for transmission service in those critical hours.
Well, I think we've spent a bit of time on this topic, from what I understand. I don't mean to cut you off in any way, Mark, but I do think we want to make sure we get some other questions on the table. And I think we get your comments, at least we understand it. Let's reflect upon this a little bit further and maybe move on to some of the other stuff so that we can keep moving. Otherwise, I'm afraid we might run out of time.
No problem. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, the EIM coordination and RFP review. So if there are any questions related to this topic, press pound 2 to raise your hand. I know that there are 3 in the queue, but if your questions are related to other topics, if you could just lower your hand for now until those topics come up. Hopefully at the end we'll have time, but anything related to this topic, we'll go ahead and take questions.
I see a caller in the queue. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, this is Ian White with Shell Energy. I'm having a Friday a brain issue here, and I can't. There was a provision of the EIM RS test that the CAISO's BA did not. Maybe exempt is the wrong word, but it is exempt from conducting, whether it's the capacity test or can you help me with that? There's sort of a two-pronged test that other BAs pass or are assessed on both, but the CAISO is only assessed on one. Do you follow what I'm?
Yeah, I understand what you're asking. So this is Don. There's 4 tests in the resource efficiency evaluation. There's the feasibility test, which is advisory information to the EIM entity, tell them whether or not they have unresolved congestion in their base schedules. If they have unresolved congestion in their base schedules, they will incur the real-time congestion offset, which is a cost allocation that they need to then deal with. And so it gives them the opportunity to avoid that. It has no impact on the amount of transfers that can occur. The CAISO has no ability to avoid the real-time congestion offset because all of our differences from our day-ahead schedules are settled in the real-time market. We don't really move our base schedules around. That's why we have the balance test. The balance test is also not applied to the CAISO because we've come in balanced from a day-ahead time frame. And all the balance test is there to do is to determine whether or not you're subject to the under-over scheduling penalties, and also does not impact your ability to have transfers. The two that do limit the ability to have transfers are the capacity test and the flexibility test, and those are applied to all balancing authority areas in the EIM, including the CAISO.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hey, Don. Dan Williams from Customized Energy Solutions. Just going to put a comment out there and maybe something to follow up on in the future. I'm curious if the CAISO has thought about whether encouraging intertime market participation, participating in your HAPS and FMM intertime market by EIM entities would help stabilize the market. And I ask that because, HAPS schedules do get included in the CAISO's RSE pool for itself. And I'm just curious if you have thought about whether that could help the CAISO pass its RSE while still getting the amount of transfers that it's currently getting from the EIM.
So again, the HAPS is basically people participating at our intertie scheduling limits. That is not limited to non-EIM. So an EIM entity could come and participate in our HAPS market. They would need to update their base schedules to reflect that, but there's no prohibition against participating in the HAPS market if you're an EIM entity.
Thanks. And I'm aware of all that. I guess just my question was around just making sure that others are fully aware of that and are aware of your, mirror match schedule process, specifically because when looking at, the data that you published about your resource efficiency, you saw a big change in the counting of CAISO's schedules between the T75 and T40, and it just seemed like if you were getting more bids in the intertime market and clearing those, that would, significantly increase your supply. And while it may decrement some from the supply pool that's still available in EIM, I would think it would be helpful to you to have that on a forward basis. And I know EDAM will do all of that and do it much better. Just putting the comment out there.
Thanks.
I do not. Yeah, please.
Yeah, sorry, we have about 10 minutes left. We're going to jump to storage if you don't mind, and then if we have time at the end, we can open it up to any of the questions. Hold on one second. So, any questions related to storage? Press pound 2 to raise your hand.
I do see a couple of callers in the queue. Moving on to the first caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Paul Nelson with Clica. Can people hear me okay?
Yes, hi, Paul.
So could you advance to some of the solutions that you're trying to address here in the presentation to kind of recap? I mean, when I looked at your proposal, it was sort of trying to encourage batteries to have a sufficient state of charge during tight conditions. Is that correct?
Hey, Paul, this is Gabe Murtaugh from California ISO. So what we're trying to do here for summer preparedness for the storage items is really paint a picture of the landscape of all the work that the ISO is doing for storage. We're really discussing the policy for the minimum state of charge requirement, which is the policy that I think you're referring to, in the Resource Adequacy Enhancements Initiative. We have gone through several iterations of that initiative with this storage proposal, and we're getting ready to publish our final proposal in a week or so. And after that's published, we will have a stakeholder call in the Resource Adequacy Enhancements Framework where we will be discussing specifically how the minimum stated charge policy will work.
Will this address the issue where batteries were actually charging during stage 2 and 3 emergencies that occurred last August?
So, yeah, we've looked at some of the data internally, Paul, on the days when we specifically drop load. The summary data for the aggregate storage participation in the market did show that while we had rotating outages, the storage fleet was primarily discharging. So we had a little bit more than 200 megawatts of storage on our system at that time. And during both days when we had rotating outages, the aggregate output from storage was probably between 150 and 200 megawatts. So we didn't really see evidence of storage charging during those intervals.
Then something's wrong, because when I looked at the web page and overlay the times, the web page from your thing with battery grid connected battery performance from like 8 to 8:30 on August 14th, and I look at the times of stage 3, which didn't end until after 8:30, batteries are clearly are charging. So I'm struggling with what you just said based on the observations of the data that I'm looking at of the charging of grid-connected batteries. So is the data wrong or not? But even that, I think... Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I can send you the email. I mean, but I think there's also the issue, too, that I see is, you know, what is charging? If batteries are charging while you're engaging in demand response, other programs, I'm struggling with that one, too, especially if you're engaging, you called reliability demand response. And then is that basically being used to enable storage to charge? I mean, is that the appropriate use of reliability demand responses to allow storage to charge instead of allowing load to continue? That was never looked in doing it that way. So I think there's a bigger issue, not just during stage emergencies. There's the interaction of what's going on when reliability demand response is being engaged, and what's the behavior of storage.
Yeah. Hey, Paul, this is Greg Cook. Let me add a little to this. We have, as Gabe said, we've looked into that, and we haven't seen where we were doing charging during the stage 3 emergency. We'll take another look at that. But, that being said, what we're really looking at in this initiative as well is trying to make sure that we have enhancements put in place that can help preserve our price signals during those tight supply periods. And that'll also help that we're, efficiently dispatching those storage resources, in a way that's consistent with the grid conditions. That being said, as Gabe said, what we're proposing here in this initiative, where under the management of storage resources, all we're really saying here is these are all the things we're looking at. We're not really proposing any policy changes as part of this initiative. Those are being discussed as part of the resource adequacy enhancements. The real change we're talking about is originally we had planned to put those enhancements in place in the fall of this year, but now we're looking for, at least for this portion of that, for the minimum state of charge requirement, that we would put that in place prior to this summer to help us with our summer readiness. That being said, we're also continuing to refine that proposal. We have some additional enhancements that we're going to be proposing that will be coming out in our next proposal that will be coming out here in a couple of weeks that, again, are really targeted at the objective of making sure that, this requirement we're only putting in place when it's absolutely critical that we need it to be there. And so we have some more enhancements that, we think can help get us closer to that and make sure that it'll help us get through some of those really tight, critical times when we absolutely have to have those resources charged to meet that net load peak. So, I hope everybody takes the time when we get into those proposals, again, that'll be coming out as part of the resource adequacy enhancements. There's a few additional enhancements we're looking in there. We think those will help to address a lot of the concerns that have been raised to date. But again, those are being stakeholders and discussed in that initiative, not here.
Okay. Well, I'll send Gabe an email then.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
I think I have his email somewhere. So, okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Paul. Any other questions related to storage?
Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
What? Hey, this is Mike Castellano from the CPUC. First off, I want to back up what Paul just said. There has been data, I think it may even have been in some of the graphs in the RCA, that it looked like you guys were reporting that storage was charging during those times. So, you know, sure, that's not exactly what you're talking about here, but if you're concerned about how storage is going to behave during the summer, it would be good to figure out if, you know, was that just regulation activity? Was something else going on? Is there a problem in the data? You know, because if we don't really know what's happening on the grid or in the market, then it's, you know, we don't know what we're trying to fix. I again want to say that you know, this really feels like you guys got an idea about storage, have not listened to stakeholder concerns about that. I think there are incentive problems with the proposal. I know you say you don't want to talk about the proposal, but if we're talking about summer readiness and you're saying you're going to jam this thing in the summer, we need to talk about the proposal. There are incentive problems where I'm afraid you're going to have a lot of self-scheduling of charging and discharging by storage resources due to the structure of the minimum state of charge constraint that will result in reliability issues and will result in the ISO having to do even more exceptional dispatch activity than if you don't have this proposal. And I just think that trying to rush this into place is very dangerous. And I think one of the things we're hearing throughout this call is that stakeholders have a lot of questions on almost every aspect of this. And you guys need to kind of slow down and figure out what you can actually do satisfactorily for this summer and what you actually really know will be helpful. And listen to stakeholders about that. And that's what I have right now. Thanks.
Yeah, Mike, this is Greg. You know, I guess I push back a little saying that we haven't listened to stakeholders. We've made, you know, some fairly significant changes and evolved this proposal as it's been discussed through that Resource Adequacy Enhancements Initiative for, you know, almost a year now. So, you know, there has been a lot of movement on that. And as I just mentioned, we're continuing to make some enhancements to that design, which again will be coming out in a couple of weeks. But again, these are provisions that we believe are necessary for reliability for this summer, and that's why we're pursuing those and pushing those forward at this time. And these are really limited to, you know, what is also feasible for us to be put in place this summer. This isn't the end. We're going to continue to look at additional market enhancements that we can put in place in the future that will be more of a, you know, market-based type solution for the optimization, but you know, we're limited to what we can put in place this summer. We think we're designing this in a way so that it's as minimally intrusive as possible, and that's what we're planning on putting forward, again, in our revised proposal that will be coming out here in a couple of weeks.
Okay, I just want to say that you say you're listening to stakeholders and that you've made a lot of changes. And I think stakeholders keep saying, no, this hasn't changed, which really makes it sound more like you're not listening to stakeholders, Greg. So
hey, Mike,
thanks anyway, I guess.
Yeah, no, Mike, I appreciate your feedback, and I understand, like, the continued frustration because of the queuing process for these various initiatives. But I think what we're trying to say here today is that we have made modifications since you last saw the proposal. You know, we're looking to restrict the frequency with which it would actually trigger to restrict or to even intervene with the operations of the storage resources.
Hey, Anna, you guys have said you're going to put some kind of restriction in there for when it's activated. So far, I've heard that's going to happen when non-storage is less than 110%. I've also been told you don't know when that's going to happen. And then there's been another slide that says it'll happen at some point when non-storage is not as much as we want it to be. So,
so
I have no idea how much of a limitation that actually is on how this is activated. And I've asked for data on that or how, what your goals are, any kind of information, and we haven't had any.
I understand. So, and I understand there's lots of other topics, but we're just going to take a few minutes here to discuss a little bit where this is going. And I'm going to ask that our team just do that. I think we've talked, to get into a little bit of details, we've talked about the 10%. We're looking to reduce that so that it's very targeted and make sure that we don't, it doesn't trigger that often, because we are limiting, as Greg said, this tool for purposes of ensuring we can meet our reliability. And so that's one area of direction we're looking to make. We're also looking to possibly, not have this in place all the time. Like, in other words, some kind of, I don't call it a sunset because I think that sunset always connotes the wrong tone, but some kind of termination in which we transition. Once we put other market rule changes in place, we transition off of these tools if we don't need them. So that's the commitment we're making. And also, I think, we keep talking about these things as being triggered all the time, and I get it. Without having implemented these tools, it's always hard to tell folks when it's going to trigger. But we did say we were going to look into that and provide some more information as best as we can before we complete this process. So I think those are the three prongs, if you wish, of movement we're trying to foreshadow here. It's just difficult to get into all that discussion in this particular initiative here now, because the greater RA community has been, may not all be here. So that's why we're trying to funnel it into the next process. And what we're really asking is for us to engage through that process to finalize this effort before summer.
Wait, I'm confused. You're asking for me to engage in the RA enhancements process?
No, that wasn't a joke, Mike. I understand you.
No.
All I'm saying
is I'm trying to make sure I understood what you said. I didn't take it as a joke. I'm just trying to make sure I understood what you said.
Yeah, no.
That is what. Okay.
Said, yes, in a couple of weeks we're going to, we're putting out our draft final proposal, and we're going to have some changes there. And I just went through a couple of areas where we're heading in refinements to foreshadow that. So in a couple of weeks we're going to have a proposal that more narrowly tailors this, and that's why getting into that right now just seems to be counterproductive.
Yeah, we're
heading in the right direction.
Question in the Q&A.
I'm glad you think that.
So let's go ahead and go to the next question in the queue, and then we do need to wrap it up. And we do look forward to your comments in writing next week. So can we go to the next question, please?
Sure. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Ian with Shell again. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm sorry. My microphone said it was disconnected, so a fake out. Quickly, can you tell me, and I can't remember if I saw this or heard this on a call of this topic, but somewhere I have heard that the ISO is making some software updates to the dispatch software or technical enhancements to storage resources that are on AGC so as to not diminish their state of charge while providing regulation service. Can you unpack that a little?
Yeah, I think when we put together this slide, we were sort of outlining all of the work that the ISO may be doing to get storage resources ready to go for summer 2021. One of the items that we might be working on in between now and summer 2021 was to sort of take a good look at the AGC formulation. What we found is with the very high ramping speeds of storage resources, it's almost as if our AGC algorithm prefers to use the storage, which could result in depleting the storage resources from having state of charge and therefore being able to provide ancillary services. So one of the things we were doing is sort of looking to potentially make enhancements to that algorithm to sort of put, calls from the storage resources on the same playing field as, say, traditional gas generation or something like that. To be frank, we haven't fully fleshed out how we're going to make these changes, but we wanted to use this platform as sort of a way that we could just inform all stakeholders on all of the work that's ongoing for storage resources. And this is something that we're contemplating making changes to in the next few months.
And is that's actually really interesting. From a technical perspective, is the reason that the storage resources tend to respond more quickly just because battery resources and inverter-driven technology lacks the need or lacks the ability, since it doesn't have rotating mass, there's no inertia provided to the grid, and thus it's not overcoming the forces of inertia, so then therefore it's able to respond to momentary drops or little blips in frequency.
I think that's the answer at a physical level of what's happening with the plant, of why storage resources are able to operate so much and react so much more quickly than conventional gas resources, which then leads us to model those resources with higher ramp rates in our master file parameters, which then sort of leads to this, these sort of varying outcomes when you get to AGC.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, I think that to the extent that those technical upgrades can be made would be good. And I put in comments last time, and just given the fact that this minimum state of charge is very, a lot of different opinions, and I understand some folks' concern is that the IFM is a financial market, and if you have a physical limitation in your financial market for one class of resources, that could be problematic. And the way I maybe thought about threading the needle here and compromising is to only require a minimum state of charge for for battery resources providing an AS award in the day ahead, considering that AS, I believe, is the only physically procured product in the IFM. And so maybe that would alleviate some others' concerns that minimum state of charge would only be applied to preserve a resource's ability to deliver that ancillary service in real time that it was awarded in day ahead. And then hopefully that minimum state of charge would be less impactful to those other resources. So just a thought, I put that in my last comments. I don't know if it's implementable or feasible, but maybe something to think about. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate that.
Shreyas, did you say we have 2 left in the queue?
Yes.
Okay, why don't we take those questions? If you could be brief, we'd appreciate it. We are past the end time, but we'll go ahead and go to those 2 callers, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Sure. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Good morning. This is Sergio Dueñas with the California Energy Storage Alliance. First of all, I'm glad that I made the cut in the queue since I couldn't do so in other calls. We've had a lot of participation. I just wanted, I'll be really brief. I wanted to echo a lot of Mike's concerns, and we have 2 points that we sort of want the staff to consider regarding this proposal. The first one is even though we know the staff has changed the proposal to sort of incorporate a trigger condition that would not necessitate this daily and some modifications so that the restriction wouldn't apply to all intervals of the day. We are still waiting for any form of empirical analysis or data that will show us what these restrictions would entail. The ISO, according to the schedule in our enhancements, they want to bring this up at the board meeting in March. I hear in this call that a draft final proposal will be published in the next 2 weeks. This gives us basically less than 3 weeks between the draft final proposal and the March board meeting. That is hardly an adequate schedule for us to look at the data in case any data is actually published. I'm assuming that there will be some, but it's hardly enough to look at the data and collaborate with the ISO. Second, our concern, CISA, we represent over 100 companies in the storage industry. Several of our individual members actually have filed comments as well in our enhancements, highlighting how this is a discriminatory proposal, how this actually might create more reliability concerns, and how a lot of the behavior that the ISO is trying to limit by storage resources actually relates to the multi-interval optimization tool and to how the ISO views the bit curves of storage. None of these concerns have been integrated into the draft final proposal of our enhancements. For other topics, we can see what stakeholders have said. Right now, the record does not show our concerns fully. And finally, Greg, you made a comment that I appreciate a lot, which is that the ISO is seeing that this proposal right now is somewhat of a given the emergency conditions we're at and the fact that we need to get something out by the summer. I understand that pressure. We all have pressures in our jobs to get stuff done. We understand. But you mentioned that you will be trying to get more some form of market mechanism out there later to improve upon this. We've actually urged staff at the Our Enhancements Initiative to incorporate that commitment formally into the proposal, and that hasn't happened either. So my question on this part is, do you see this as an interim proposal? Is that what I'm understanding? And if so, will the ISO commit formally to view it only as interim and keep working with stakeholders to reach a solution that actually is not discriminatory and is based on market principles?
Hey, Sergio. Thanks so much for those comments. I really appreciate that. I know you and I have had a lot of dialogue on these specific topics offline, and let me assure you that the ISO has been working to address these things, if not necessarily with everything that we put forward in proposals to date, but certainly internally thinking about how we're going to advance the ball on these. So just to say a few words on some of the comments that you just made, and I know that this was a concern from the PUC as well, but we absolutely are going to be presenting data on how often we think that this is going to be triggered. We're currently working very closely with a number of internal business units to try to, balance the risk of, not triggering this on days when we need it with, our understanding that every time we do trigger this, it's burdensome for the storage community, which we're going to need in the future, and we're going to have to rely on in the future in order to operate the grid. So we're currently doing that. As we complete our analysis, I'm going to be including the analysis that we've done and the data that we have in the next version, the final proposal of the resource adequacy enhancements. So we will have that information, and we are trying to get that trigger we're trying to get that to trigger as infrequently as possible, subject to making sure that it is triggered on those days when we need it. I know that you and other stakeholders have also asked that this be triggered and used in less actual intervals during the operating day in the real-time market. We hear that comment and we understand that. And what we're working on right now for our final proposal is to do just that and only impose the requirement in the hours immediately preceding discharge hours. So I think we're going to be able to meet that requirement with our next final proposal. I know you've also mentioned, concerns about scheduling and moving so quickly on this. I think you did a nice job sort of summarizing the comments that Greg Cook made earlier. I think I would sort of echo those comments and just say, because we are expecting more than 1,200 new megawatts of storage on the grid by August, we really do need to have something in place to ensure that these storage resources are charged. And at this point, this is sort of the best tool that we can come up with. To your other comment about a market mechanism which is going to compensate storage resources, I think we agree with that. And in light of that, and this is what Greg was also referring to, we will be starting a new stakeholder initiative to address storage issues in the next few weeks. And one of the major items in that initiative will be to develop just such a market mechanism so that we can start to compensate storage resources for energy. I think we're also going to be looking at multi-interval optimization questions in that initiative as well, and hopefully that can address some of those concerns.
Yeah, thanks for that very complete answer, Gabe. I just want to say it would be very valuable if we can have some sort of mention of this in the final proposal so that both the ISO reflects its commitment to move towards something that is more adequate rather than just a patchwork solution right now, first of all. And second, we really appreciate that you will be doing the data analysis. Would like to collaborate on that. But certainly this doesn't eliminate fully the concerns that we see this proposal could face both at the board and at FERC. I'll just leave it at that for time, but thank you for your understanding and your time, Gabe. Thank you.
No, thanks, Sergio. We appreciate your questions and your continued engagement.
Moving on to the next caller. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thanks. And I think just as a general announcement, I'm being told we have time for one more question, and then we have to wrap up because we'll lose the line.
Yeah,
thank you.
Moving on to the next caller. Caller, your line is unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Lisa Olson-Bro for EDF Renewables. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Lisa. Great. To sort of add to the chorus of energy storage questions, I was hoping we could quickly discuss a little bit your ideas on the interaction between this minimum state of charge proposal and the idea of the scarcity pricing, or that prices can go higher in the real-time market, and how that sort of plays together with this idea that we're somewhat placing some restrictions on energy storage resources.
Yeah, I'm certainly not an expert on the scarcity pricing proposal, so maybe Don wants to weigh in on that. But the minimum state of charge requirements for storage resources, we sort of outlined that this would be a tool that we would only be applying on the tightest days. So I think you're right. Those days could potentially overlap with days when scarcity pricing is used, as those would be tight days on the system. And these would only be applicable to resource adequacy storage resources, and they would only be applicable when those resource adequacy storage resources received discharge schedules. And with the most recent proposal, which we're about to come out with, we would be applying that as near to the discharge schedule as possible. So hopefully storage resources the impact of this requirement would be minimalized for the storage resources because it would be in such a close window to the discharge schedules. I don't know if anybody else on the line wants to add to that.
Okay, well, I'll take the silence as hopefully everyone noodling over that, because I do think that we need to consider, when we're specifically looking at a set of resource type, and perhaps penalizing them in a sense. I'm not sure that's exactly the intent of the market and price signals. So I just hope that we can really consider real-time price signals and allowing resources to respond accordingly. And I think it probably could be helpful to see, we'd love to see some data, our energy storage resources showing that they're not responding to price signals and things of that nature. I'm not sure the two proposals exactly work together in what we're trying to achieve here. So thanks for that.
Yeah, no, this is Greg. I'll just add a couple of thoughts to that. I do think there's potential for, the appropriate scarcity pricing design to help drive, the better incentives to make sure that the storage resources are available when we need them. We do have a couple of limitations under our current market design that we're having to take into account. For example, we have a $1,000 bid cap, so you tend to have, somewhat muted incentives when you start getting close to that bid cap, prior to like the net load peak, because you would have incentive for those storage resources just as economic for them to discharge prior to that net load peak than it would be over that net load peak, and which could potentially make them unavailable. So, those are the types of incentives that potentially a scarcity pricing proposal could start to address. So, we'll have to be looking at all of these proposed future changes, in a comprehensive way to find out, what's the most efficient and economic way for, us to integrate the storage resources into the market. So I appreciate those comments.
Yes, appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
I don't see any further. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we need to wrap it up. We are past the time. We really appreciate all the comments today. I did post an updated comments template after the call on the 27th. We received a request from a stakeholder to ask if stakeholders would have an opportunity to prioritize the topics in this initiative. So I did add that to the comments template. So please use the link that's on this on this slide when submitting your comments. Those are due next Wednesday. So thanks everybody for joining us. Greatly appreciate it. Hope you enjoy your weekend. Thank you, Shreya.
Thank you. That concludes our conference. Thank you for using AT&T Event Services. You may now disconnect.